Success isn't something that happens overnight. It's something that we grow into. So it's not this one big breakthrough or single aha moment. It's a journey, a series of stages we've moved through as we learn more about ourselves and what we truly want. But we all pretty much start in the same place, and that is with a feeling, a pain point that we can't ignore anymore, or maybe a deep desire for something more. So maybe it's more freedom, more money, more confidence, more purpose. And that's really where success begins, with this awareness. And from there, we start seeking answers. So we read, we listen, we learn, we consume ideas that help us understand ourselves better. And this is an exciting stage to be in. It opens up our minds. But then at some point, just learning, it's no longer enough anymore. And the same information starts to sound different. We begin to actually see ourselves in what we're reading or hearing. And this is where self-awareness develops. It's when the work starts to feel more personal. And then after this stage comes integration. This is where we take what we've learned and actually start practicing it. We create new habits. We try new ways of responding. We begin to live differently. And this stage isn't always perfect, but it is progress. Every small change adds up. And then over time, something shifts. And the things that we've been practicing, they start to feel more natural. And we're not reminding ourselves to be confident or to set boundaries. We just are. This is embodiment. This is the stage when who we are becoming starts to match how we live. And from there, something even more powerful happens, because you start to notice that your growth affects the people around you. And the way you lead yourself inspires others. So your energy, your clarity, your confidence, these all influence how other people show up as well. And you don't have to be a teacher on these things or to be a coach. You simply lead by example. It's at this stage of success where your personal transformation becomes influential. So these then are the levels of success, from awareness to learning to self-understanding to action to embodiment, and then finally to impact. And it's these levels of success I want to explore on this episode. So let's dive in. Welcome to the She Leads podcast, a space that empowers women like you to build success in a way that feels authentic, energizing, and aligned with who you really are. In a world that tries to convince us that success means hustling harder and following everyone else's rules, we're here to rewrite the script. This is about success that feels nourishing, not depleting. Success that brings the fulfillment, impact, and recognition you deserve, whilst ultimately giving you the financial power to create the future you want and inspire meaningful change in the world around you. Make sure to hit the follow button so that you never miss an episode, and come and say hello on Instagram. You can find us at she_leads.academy. Let's dive in. Hello ladies, and welcome to a brand new episode of the She Leads show. You know what I've noticed? I have noticed that so many of us are working hard, we're growing, we're learning, we're doing all the right things, and still feeling like we're maybe not moving forwards in the way that we hoped we would. So the woman I'm talking to here is the woman who is maybe reading all the books, she's listening to the podcasts, watching the YouTube channels, watching the masterclasses. She feels like she is doing the work. And I think if we're honest, for many of us, a lot of that work actually stays in our minds. So this is where we know the concepts, we can explain them, but they haven't fully shifted the way that we live yet. And that's because there are many different levels to success, and most people get stuck in the consumption stage, where it perhaps feels like we are working on ourselves, perhaps feels like progress, but we kind of get stuck here. It's this stage where we're busy learning, but we're not necessarily always seeing the results that we want. And many people actually get stuck in this stage, I think, for their whole lives. And there's a part of them that feels like they're progressing. They're convincing themselves that they're progressing because they're consuming more information. They're learning more things. But this isn't what creates results. Success isn't just about how much you know, it's about how deeply you apply what you know, how much you embody it, how much you let it shape the way you lead yourself and your life. So for today's episode, I want to really talk about how we move through these different levels of success, what these levels actually are, and why moving beyond this learning stage really changes everything. Now, before we actually get to this learning stage, there is what I call the level 1. This is the starting point where desire meets discomfort. So every transformation, I believe, every chapter of a woman's success starts in one of these two places. Either you've reached a pain point in your life where you're feeling like enough is enough, or you are feeling strongly pulled, compelled for something more. And usually it's a combination of both. So maybe you're at a stage where life looks fine. Maybe you've ticked all the boxes. You've done everything you were supposed to do. But inside, there is that kind of aching feeling. I thought I'd be more fulfilled by now. Maybe you're in the middle of a season that actually feels very heavy. Maybe it feels like everything's falling apart. And so that pain point for you right now is very strong. Maybe a lot of the things you used to tolerate suddenly feel impossible to carry. The job that used to excite you now drains you. Maybe it's a relationship that's just destroying your soul. Maybe it's goals that once you felt like they mattered, they feel quite flat. So this stage 1 phase, it's this moment which many women reach before they go through a breakthrough. It's this catalyst. And often this stage is quite uncomfortable, especially if our pain points are quite strong or we're kind of feeling very restless with where we are right now. It's uncomfortable, but it is also sacred because discomfort is data. It's a sign that your current reality no longer fits the person you're becoming. And desire, when we have a strong desire for something, that pull towards something more, is the compass pointing you towards your next level. Now, often we try to shut that voice down. When we have this desire for something more, we tell ourselves, we've just got to be grateful. We've just got to accept what we have, be grateful for what we have, stop overthinking it, live in the moment, enjoy what we've already created, just to keep pushing on with our lives as they are. But that's not always self-leadership. That's often survival. True self-leadership, the kind that I really advocate for here in She Leads, begins when we stop running from that whisper of our desire and actually start listening to it, honoring what it is that we really want. And this really starts in that space between pain and possibility. It's that moment when you kind of think to yourself, I'm not really sure what comes next, but I know that I cannot stay here anymore. That moment is your turning point. It's where your awareness begins. It's where you start moving from being a passenger in your life, just coasting along, doing what you've always done, just kind of soldiering on with life, to actually becoming the woman who leads her own life. She's living by design rather than by default. Now, this pain and desire, they will often arrive together. So pain is the thing that pushes you to make changes, and desire is the thing that's pulling you, the thing that's calling you into something more. The pain pushes you out of where you've been. The desire pulls you towards where you are meant to go. And what I will say is that desire isn't always loud and glamorous. Sometimes it's just that kind of little flicker of a vision for a kind of life that maybe you don't have words yet for. It might not be completely clear. So maybe you're kind of hearing yourself saying, I really want to just feel proud of what I'm creating again, or I want to stop settling, or I want to wake up with more energy and clarity, not just a long to-do list. I want to just feel like I'm living life more intentionally, not just going through the motions. So you don't necessarily know what that life is yet, but you're starting to have these sort of moments of kind of mini wake-up calls. And then when you start to really listen to that inner voice, even if you don't necessarily have a plan yet, you begin to access something very powerful, and that is agency. This is where you start moving from waiting for things to happen for you to actually making changes in your life. You start deciding to change. And that decision, really that is the first moment of success. When you stop believing that life is just happening to you. When you stop just going through the motions and you start realizing that life responds through you. You have a choice in this moment about how your life unfolds, and you decide to choose life in your favor. Now, I think a part of this stage that is often not talked about when pain meets desire, it's that this part doesn't always feel like empowerment at first. It can actually feel like confusion, restlessness, sometimes even guilt, just a feeling like, or just a little bit lost in our life. Desire can actually be very confronting because it asks you to look at the parts of your life that are no longer aligned. And that really takes courage. So during this phase, you might question yourself. You might say, well, who am I to want more when I already have so much? Or what if people don't understand the desires that I now have? Or if they don't understand this version of me? What if I go after what I want and I fail? But I think beneath those fears, there is that desire that's still going to be there. You are meant for more, not because you're not enough, but because you're ready for your next chapter. And I think this is the paradox of growth. It always begins in that space between pain and possibility. So again, there's quite uncomfortable space. Pain is the thing that's waking you up. Desire is the thing that's calling you forwards. And the question at this phase is, are you going to listen? Are you going to decide to move forwards? Choose to move forwards? Because the woman who creates success, the kind that's real, the kind of success that's lasting and aligned, these aren't the women that have it all figured out. They're the ones who have the courage to follow that pull before it makes any sense. And maybe this is where you are right now, standing on the edge of something new, not sure what it looks like yet, but knowing you can't stay where you are. And really, this is the moment where everything that we discuss in She Leads begins. It's not with perfection, but with permission. Permission to be curious, permission to explore what that something more really means for you. Permission to believe that the pull you feel isn't wrong. It's your inner wisdom calling you. Success doesn't start when everything is clear. It's not about, oh, I'm going to be successful because I have this path that I want to follow in my life. It starts when you're brave enough to say, I don't actually know what this path is, but something inside me is ready to grow. Really, this is the seed of self-leadership. And from here, we can then begin to talk about what happens next. Because what happens next is when that sort of seed of desire leads us into the next phase of transformation. This is where we start seeking out the information, the ideas, the guidance that help us to start building what we want. So this is the second phase. This is the information stage, the consumption stage. And I think this is probably where most people stay. Most people get stuck thinking that they're doing the work, but are actually just consuming more and more and more, and maybe feeling quite overwhelmed or conflicted with what they know. So during this stage, this is where we start searching for answers. Maybe you're there now. Maybe you're the person that is listening to the podcasts, buying the books, scrolling through information on Instagram. We begin to kind of absorb things that sound like the truth that we've been trying to say, but maybe we didn't have the words for yet. Consuming, this is what we're doing. This is what I refer to as the level 2 of transformation, the information stage. And there's nothing wrong with this stage. It's a powerful stage because I think for many of us, this is the first time we're exposed to ideas that challenge the old patterns that we grew up with. The patterns that told us to be small, to please everyone, to measure success by productivity or approval. So when you start consuming new ideas, it's like oxygen. You know, you're discovering things like boundaries and self-worth and self-love and law of attraction and energy alignment and purpose. And it feels, oh my God, it just feels so exciting when you're hearing all of these things for the first time. I remember when I first started to really read about the law of attraction and the power of now. I remember reading that book. I was like, where has this been my whole life? And you start thinking, well, oh, actually, it's not just me. There's a language for what I've been feeling. You kind of have that huge awakening moment. And I've seen women come alive just from that moment. I remember feeling like I came alive from that phase of consuming. Finally saying, oh, I finally understand why I've been exhausted for years. Or, I realize now that success isn't about working harder. It's about working in alignment. I realize now that I am not just, a passenger in my life. I am purposely able to co-create my life with the universe. Information is the thing that allows us to change how we see ourselves, how we see our life. But again, what's tricky about this stage is it's because it's where a lot of women will get stuck. And you can start consuming so much information that it actually becomes overload. Especially when, one area where you get your information from, say, is manifest. Maybe another says strategize. One coach says be more, one says do less. And suddenly, instead of feeling empowered, you feel like you're swimming in a sea of all of these mixed messages and you're inspired, but you're not really sure what to do with any of that information. And this is because information on its own doesn't create transformation. Yes, it opens your mind, but it doesn't let you change your patterns. It's kind of like reading a book on nutrition whilst you still eat the same food. You know what could help, but you haven't yet embodied the change. And that's okay. This stage is necessary. Every woman who's ever transformed her life probably started here, absorbing, exploring, learning, trying to make sense of her own story. The key is to not get stuck, collecting information for validation, but to actually start using this information for integration. The next level of success isn't about learning more, it's about really learning yourself. It's where this knowledge actually becomes wisdom. Where you stop asking, okay, well, what else do I need to know here? And you start asking, who am I becoming? And this is where we move into the next level, level 3. This is a deeper, more reflective stage of transformation where awareness begins to change the way that you lead yourself, you lead your life. And this is where you are perhaps still consuming information, but the ideas you're drawn to, they're no longer new anymore. You're not new to personal growth. So you've probably read a lot of books, you've maybe listened to a lot of podcasts, you've heard about things like mindset and law of attraction, boundaries and purpose. You probably heard about these things more times than you can count. So you already know the theory. But this is the stage now where something starts to actually shift. Now, I think there's a world of difference between hearing something for the first time and hearing something once you already know about it. So that first time we hear about an idea, that's when our minds light up. It's like that spark of recognition. We're intrigued, we're inspired, might even feel a little bit overwhelmed at this stage. But then we start to hear it again. We start to consume more around the same topics, and we hear it again. And after a while, we don't just hear it anymore, we actually feel it. It starts to make sense to us. So it might be the same words that we've heard millions of times before, but all of a sudden, they start to reach a different place within us because we've changed. So through being deep in the trenches of consuming information, we've started to subtly change. Maybe we're thinking about things a little bit differently. We're questioning things a little bit more. Our perspective on things change. And that information, when that familiar wisdom comes around again and again, it lands deeper each time. And it's not because the information is new, it's because we are receiving it in a new way. So this is when you start finding yourself hearing the same concepts, but somehow they land differently. And sometimes it takes us to hear the same things multiple times before they actually really register with us. Now, it's not that the words have changed, it's that you have changed. And so this is what it means to consume knowledge at a deeper level. This is where you're no longer listening to understand or to collect information. You are listening to recognize yourself in the information. So maybe you've had this experience where, when you're new to personal growth, it feels like everything feels like a revelation. It's like discovering this entirely new language. But then once you've been in this work for a while, the real growth isn't coming from hearing something new. It's actually coming from hearing something familiar and finally being ready to see it. So you're not learning something, you're actually reflecting on what you're learning in relation to your own experiences. So you could hear the same phrase, the same teaching, but it hits differently because you're no longer processing it intellectually. It's not just about educating yourself on it, you're actually feeling into the words. Now, maybe during this phase, you're not fully embodying the wisdom yet, but you've gone past the surface level learning. So you're actually noticing yourself in the notes rather than just taking notes on something. So you're really starting to analyze what you're hearing here. You're relating what you're hearing back to your own experiences. You're connecting the dots between what you've learned and how you're actually living. So this is a subtle but very powerful difference between consuming information and actually using it as a mirror. So this is where you may find yourself reading a sentence or listening to a phrase you've maybe heard before, but suddenly it hits very differently. And this phase, what this phase is really all about is self-awareness. That's the essence of this phase of transformation. So information by itself can be the thing that inspires us, but awareness is actually what changes us. So self-awareness turns the external knowledge into an internal truth. So this is, for example, when you start looking at your habits or your patterns or your reactions, and you start to actually see the story beneath those things. So without this awareness, we just keep repeating the cycles. With awareness, we have the power to choose what cycles we create next, what changes we make in our life. And that's really powerful. Now, what I think is really interesting about this sort of phase, when people are consuming lots of information and they're kind of then looking to go a little bit deeper with the information that they're consuming, is that they often have the illusion of self-awareness purely because they've consumed the information. Most of us think we are self-aware, and actually we're not. Because knowing your personality or recognizing your triggers isn't actually the same as being aware of how you create your own reality. So real self-awareness, it requires humility. It asks you to see yourself honestly, not just in who you want to be, but who you are actually being right now. So self-awareness then is really the difference between the just consuming information phase and the next phase where you're going deeper with it. You're actually connecting the dots between what you're consuming and your own life, and you're creating these new awarenesses in your life. Now, the next phase is actually integrating this wisdom, turning awareness into practice. Because yes, of course, self-awareness is powerful, but that alone isn't going to create the change. And so it's not enough to just understand the wisdom. You actually have to live it. And this is where integration comes in. So integration, you want to think of this as the bridge between insight and embodiment. It's where what you've been thinking about, what you've been learning about, actually becomes what you start practicing. So let's say, for example, you've been learning about the importance of boundaries and how to set clearer boundaries. And you've realized, actually, this is a part of my own journey to worthiness, is setting more boundaries. You've had that awakening. Integration is when you actually start saying no. Or maybe you've become aware that you really downplay your ideas. Integration is when you start practicing speaking up, even if your voice is shaking. Maybe you've begin to realize that you just rush through life on autopilot. Integration is when you start creating intentional pauses in your life. Even if it's just 2 minutes before checking your phone. So integration is really about pattern interruption. It's those small conscious practices, conscious shifts that slowly rewire how you show up. Often we think change happens in these grand gestures, but really it starts with these repeated choices, these small practices of integration. Now, when you integrate what you've learned, your awareness, it then becomes active. So it's then you catch yourself mid-thought and think, I'm doing that thing again where I minimize myself. And integrating it then, you pause, you breathe, you choose differently. And that's really what transformation is. It's transformation happening in real time. So we don't always need these massive life overhauls. We need these small moments of awareness followed by moments of practice. So that's what these integrative tools do. And over time, those moments start stacking and they build new habits, new energy, and ultimately new results. Now, the next phase is the embodiment stage. So this often comes after a season of integration where maybe you've learned a lot of wisdom and you've been applying these practical tools into your life. Maybe it's certain rituals you have. Maybe it's certain exercises that you do. It could be journaling. It could be EFT. It could be your meditation. All of these practices are helping you to feel subtle shifts. So maybe you start to notice these shifts in your life. Maybe you become more confident. Maybe you start to take bolder decisions within your life. Maybe you see tangible results within your success or your work or your relationships. But a lot of these changes still require a conscious effort. So you're still feeling like you're practicing becoming the woman you're meant to be, but you're not yet fully embodying her. And the next stage then is this full embodiment. So almost think of integration is when you apply the wisdom. So this is deliberate, it's structured, it's intentional. So these are, again, your practices. Kind of think of that as the training ground where you are practicing becoming the woman you want to be. But embodiment is when that woman starts leading your life for you. So integration is a conscious effort. Embodiment is a natural expression. So it might be that integration asks, how can I apply this? How can I integrate this into my life? But embodiment asks, who am I when this becomes effortless? Now, integration alone, I think, again, this is another kind of level at which people get stuck because it almost becomes addictive to have all of these different practices, and we get shiny object syndrome, and we kind of think like we're constantly upgrading or up-leveling, but actually we're just going through the same cycles of integrating, just it looks a little bit different each time. Integration is powerful, but the thing with integration, it often happens in isolation. So it's you with your journal or your meditation or your rituals. It might be with a group of people that you are doing these things, but it's still a solo event. So maybe you are, let's say, in a women's circle, and you're talking about these things, but you're really kind of practicing these changes in your own inner world. And yes, that can build discipline. It can build self-awareness. It can also, however, keep you inside the echo chamber of your own perspective, because when you are practicing alone, it's very easy to miss your blind spots. So these are the subtle ways you still play small or stay safe, or you just keep repeating old stories. And I think this is the limitation with integration. It teaches you to rehearse the new version of yourself, but it doesn't always hold you accountable to becoming that version of you. Now, to truly embody your next level, you often need feedback and reflection and the energy of others who are already living from that space. So you need mirrors, not just methods. Now, embodiment happens when the gap between who you're practicing to be and who you are actually starts to close. So you notice that your choices and your energy and your environment are beginning to reflect the woman that you've been rehearsing. You're not trying to be more confident, you simply are more confident. You're not reminding yourself to set boundaries. These boundaries exist naturally. You're not working to believe that you're worthy. You just don't entertain anything else that says otherwise. So this is where success is becoming something that you actually are living versus something that you feel like you're chasing, something that's outside of you. Now, this stage is when your life really begins to visibly up-level. This is where you really start to see tangible results. So opportunities aligning, money flowing in, relationships deepening, clarity amplifying. It's not because you suddenly got lucky. It's because your internal world finally matches your external actions. So this is where you've really shifted your identity to become who you really are deep down. You've peeled away everything else that doesn't match who you are destined to be, and then your reality rises to meet that version of you. Now, embodiment is necessary because you cannot lead from rehearsal forever. That energy of practicing. Again, so many people get stuck in this integration phase where they've got all of these different rituals and they just feel like, if I just add another tool on, it's going to move me forwards. Yes, these tools can be very powerful and we can continue to use these tools, but there is a difference between saying, I'm learning to be the woman that I'm meant to be, and actually just simply being her. When you embody your wisdom, you actually stop oscillating between your past and your potential. You operate from alignment instead of effort. You stop trying to prove and just start allowing. And this is when success and your leadership become magnetic, because people can feel the congruence between who you are and what you teach. And that congruence is the essence of embodied success. Now, embodiment, what I will say is, it does not mean you've arrived. It means you've integrated enough that your growth now shows up naturally, but you will still be evolving. However, how you're evolving is different because you're evolving from your power, not from your pain. So you don't have to remind yourself to do the work. Your life is the work. You're not practicing presence. You are presence. You're not learning leadership, you're living leadership. So there's a subtle difference here. Now, again, if we come back to the limits of integration, I think a lot of these tools, although you can do them with a coach, often these are things that can be done alone. So you can read books, you can reflect, you can meditate, you can repeat your mantras, you can journal. All of that is really important work. But at some point, you'll probably start to notice that you keep circling around the same insights, hitting the same edges, hesitating in the same places. It's not that you're failing, it's just providing you with feedback. Integration done in isolation will have a ceiling. You can't always see what you can't see. We all have blind spots. The patterns that we justify to ourselves, the stories that we keep defending, the identities that we unconsciously protect. And this is where proximity, which is being in the energy of somebody who already embodies what you're practicing, this becomes transformational. And at this stage, if you haven't already, this is where you really need that mentor or coach, somebody who, you're in close proximity with, to take you to that next level. You don't just need more information at this stage, you need reflection. You need somebody who can hold up a mirror to the places that you still hide or shrink or sabotage. Again, it's these blind spots that they see that you can't. So it may be they actually challenge the stories that you've normalized. Maybe they actually remind you of your power when your mind forgets. Proximity is a thing that creates calibration. So being in close energy with somebody who already lives the version of success that you're stepping into, it regulates your nervous system to believe it's possible for you too. And that's something that reading or journaling alone just cannot do. Mentorship, it collapses time. It accelerates the integration. It anchors the embodiment. Because again, growth at this level, it's not about collecting steps. It's about stabilizing a new frequency of self-trust, of confidence, of alignment. And you can only stabilize what you can feel. And it's proximity that lets you feel it. So through that support of a coach or a mentor, through their reflection, you'll stop practicing becoming the woman that you are meant to be and actually start living as her. And when you do so, you'll begin to notice that the things that you used to force now just flow into your life. You make decisions faster, you communicate more clearly, you attract what matches your energy instead of chasing what validates it. You're not reminding yourself to be more confident, you simply are more confident. Success stops feeling like something that you are constantly working towards, and you actually start feeling like it's something that you just naturally create. Of course you create success. Why wouldn't you? This is who you are. Now, you may think that it ends there with embodiment, but I actually think there's another level of growth that happens beyond embodiment. And this is the point where your transformation stops being just about you and actually starts becoming a gift to others. So it's when you've done the work, the healing, the awareness, the integration, and these things become so woven into who you are being that simply in your presence, people begin to shift. You don't even need to teach it, you just live it. And so this is what I refer to as leadership through embodiment. And this isn't just for coaches or mentors, by the way. I think it's for any woman who's committing to leading her life with intention and alignment. So maybe you're a business owner or a leader in your field or a mother or a manager or a woman who's just walking her path with awareness. It doesn't matter. I think when you become deeply embodied, your energy then becomes a mirror. The way you hold yourself, the way you speak, the way you make decisions, it all carries a frequency that other people feel. It's not that you have to tell people how to live differently. They already sense that in you. And I think that's true leadership. That's mentorship or coaching without actually needing that as a title. This is where you become the example. You're no longer talking about what you're working on. You are what you once worked towards. You're leading by alignment. You're inspiring by integrity. You're not trying to prove yourself. Instead, your presence gives other people permission to say, well, if she can live life this way, maybe I can too. That's when your growth really becomes an impact. And it's this level that I'm so passionate towards. And I think this is why I found myself in the space of training coaches and helping women, become the example that they want to see in the world. I think this is the level where your own personal transformation begins to ripple outwards. So let's say it's the boundaries that you've built. They are able to model self-respect for others. If it's the confidence that you've created within yourself, that confidence can also show others what's possible. This is the kind of influence where you walk into a room and the energy shifts, not because you're louder than everybody else, but because you're clearer. That's the power of embodiment. It teaches without effort. When you lead yourself, you unconsciously invite others to rise. And I think that's how change begins. Not through performance, but through presence. Now, I think reaching this level, I don't think, again, it means you have arrived. I think it just means that your leadership has become relational. So you're not just transforming your own life, you're transforming the spaces you occupy, whether that is in business or whether, maybe you're in the corporate space, maybe it's even just in your friendships or your family. Your growth shows up everywhere you go. You become this lighthouse for other women, not by shining brighter than them, but by showing them what's possible when a woman fully trusts herself. And this, I think, is where success turns into legacy. This is when you live the work so deeply that your presence becomes an example. You contribute to something that is far greater than just yourself. And I think it's for this reason why I know a big part of my life's work is helping women step into this space and training women as coaches. Because I've seen what happens when a woman truly moves through these levels herself, when she's faced the discomfort that wakes her up, when she's taken the time to learn and unlearn, when she's built awareness, when she's integrated new patterns, and finally she's embodied the woman she was always meant to be, something changes in her energy. She doesn't just know how to transform, she is the transformation. And from that place, she can't help but want to share it. And that's when her growth becomes a legacy. I think it's one thing to heal and rise for yourself, but when you learn how to guide others through that same process, your impact expands beyond your own story. And I've seen what happens when women lead this way in business, in coaching, in their careers, in their homes. Their presence changes rooms. Their clarity changes conversations. Their confidence, it gives other women permission to rise too. And this is, again, why I'm so passionate about training and supporting female coaches, not just to build businesses, but to build a brand new standard of leadership. Our transformation, the personal transformation that we go through, it doesn't end with us, it starts with us. Every time a woman learns to lead herself, she opens the door for another woman to do the same. And that, I think, right there is how the world changes. So thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. It really means a lot for you to follow along with this podcast. So if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button and I will catch you in the next episode. If today's episode lit something up in you and you are ready to build a coaching business that not only changes lives but creates the income and freedom you deserve, then right now you can request a free trial of our She Leads Academy coach training. To get your free trial, just head over to Instagram and visit us at she_leads.academy. You will find the link to the free trial in our bio. I cannot wait to see what's possible for you.